Sarah Williams was 28 when she faced the moment that finally forced her to choose between her family and her future. For 3 painful years she had lived with a destroyed knee after a hiking accident that changed everything in seconds. "I heard the pop before I even hit the ground," she once told her best friend Vivian. The sound had echoed through the forest like a small gunshot. Park rangers carried her down the mountain that day because she could no longer stand. What began as a simple outdoor trip slowly became the start of a long nightmare filled with pain, frustration, and uncertainty. Sarah worked as a museum curator in a busy city museum where standing and walking were part of her daily job. She guided visitors through galleries, climbed stairs to reach the archives, and spent hours on her feet explaining exhibits. After the accident, every step became a struggle. "It feels like someone is pushing nails into my knee," she admitted one afternoon while talking to Vivian over lunch. Doctors eventually confirmed the full damage. Her ACL was completely torn, her meniscus damaged, and the cartilage in her knee was slowly deteriorating. Physical therapy helped a little, but the pain always returned. After months of medical visits and endless insurance approvals, Sarah finally received the news she had been waiting for. She qualified for reconstructive knee surgery. The procedure was scheduled for June 15 with Dr. Michael Hayes, one of the most respected orthopedic surgeons in the city. "We shouldn't delay this too long," he warned during their consultation. "Your cartilage is deteriorating faster than expected." The surgery would take nearly 5 hours and involve rebuilding her ACL, repairing the meniscus, and restoring damaged cartilage. Recovery would take months of physical therapy, but it would give Sarah something she desperately wanted again. Sarah began preparing for the surgery months in advance. She saved 3 months of salary because her disability benefits would only cover part of her income during recovery. She filled her freezer with prepared meals and rented medical equipment for her apartment. Vivian promised to stay with her for the first 2 weeks after surgery. "You won't go through this alone," Vivian told her firmly. Everything was organized carefully, from work leave to medical paperwork. Even her parents knew the date. Sarah had told them about the surgery several times since February, explaining why the exact day mattered. But Sarah's younger sister, Diana Williams, had always been the center of their parents' attention. Diana was 25, charming, dramatic, and used to getting everything she wanted. When she announced her engagement, their mother became completely absorbed in planning the perfect wedding. Conversations about flowers, dresses, venues, and decorations filled every family call. Sarah tried to be supportive even while dealing with constant knee pain. Then one evening a message appeared in the family group chat. "Big announcement." Diana wrote excitedly. "The venue had a cancellation and we moved the wedding to June 15th. Sarah stared at the screen in silence. Sarah stared at the message for several long seconds, feeling her stomach slowly twist. June 15th was not just any day for her. It was the surgery date she had waited nearly 3 years to receive. She immediately picked up her phone and called her mother. "Mom, you know that's my surgery date, right?" she said carefully. Her mother sounded cheerful at first. "Oh yes, your knee thing," she replied casually. Sarah felt a quiet sting at the way she dismissed it. "It's not just a knee thing," Sarah explained calmly. "It's reconstructive surgery. I can't change it." Her mother's tone shifted slightly as she listened. "Well," she said after a short pause, "maybe you should try to reschedule it." Sarah blinked in disbelief. "Reschedule it?" she repeated slowly. "Mom, the surgeon is booked for months. My insurance approval expires soon. I can't just move it." But her mother sounded completely unconcerned. "Sarah, Diana's wedding only happens once," she insisted. "Family events should come first." Sarah gripped the phone tighter. "This surgery determines whether I can walk normally again," she said quietly. "It's not something I can simply postpone." The conversation ended without any real understanding. The next morning, Sarah called Dr. Hayes' office just to confirm what she already knew. The surgical scheduler spoke gently but firmly. "The next available opening would be October 8th, she explained. "And even that depends on insurance approval." Sarah immediately understood the risk. Waiting another 4 months could permanently worsen her knee damage. Dr. Hayes had already warned her about that possibility. After the call, Sarah sent screenshots and medical notes to her parents, hoping clear information might help them understand the seriousness of the situation. That evening her father called her instead. His voice sounded calm but firm. Your mother told me about the situation, he began. But you need to understand something. Sarah already sensed where the conversation was heading. Your sister's wedding is already booked, he continued. Deposits have been paid. Everything is arranged. Sarah tried to stay patient. My surgery has been scheduled for months too, she reminded him gently. But her father sighed. It's not the same, he said. Your sister's wedding is a once-in-a-lifetime event. Surely the doctor can find another date. Later that night Diana herself finally called. She sounded irritated before Sarah even finished saying hello. Are you seriously going to ruin my wedding because of a knee surgery? Diana demanded immediately. Sarah closed her eyes, trying to stay calm. It's not just surgery, she explained carefully. It determines whether I'll have permanent damage. Diana scoffed loudly. You're being dramatic, she said. You always make everything about yourself. The words landed harder than Sarah expected. After a long pause, Sarah answered quietly, I'm not making anything about me. I'm just trying to keep my ability to walk. Diana let out an annoyed sigh that Sarah could clearly hear through the phone. You're exaggerating, she said sharply. People get knee surgeries all the time. Sarah sat quietly on her couch, her leg elevated with an ice pack pressed against the swelling joint. Yes, they do, she replied calmly. And when they're scheduled for a reason. But Diana was not interested in hearing explanations. Mom and Dad are spending over $30,000 on this wedding, she said. Everything is already planned. Guests have confirmed. You're the only problem now. Sarah felt something tighten inside her chest. I'm not trying to be a problem, she said softly. I physically can't attend if I'm in surgery that day. Diana's voice became colder. You're not even in the wedding party, she said bluntly. You're just a guest. That comment surprised Sarah more than anything else. Diana had chosen 4 bridesmaids, most of them friends she had known less than a year. Yet her own sister had not been included. Sarah realized something then that hurt more than the words themselves. Her presence had never really mattered. If it doesn't matter whether I'm there, Sarah said slowly, then it shouldn't be a big deal if I miss it. Diana immediately grew defensive. Of course it matters, she snapped. What are people going to think when my own sister doesn't show up? Sarah almost laughed at the logic. It was not about wanting her there. It was about appearances. Diana cared more about how things looked to guests than about Sarah's medical condition. I have to go, Sarah said quietly. I'm at work right now. But Diana stopped her before she could hang up. Just reschedule the surgery, Diana insisted again. If you cared about family, you would. The words hung in the air after the call ended. Over the next 2 weeks, the pressure only grew stronger. Their mother began calling daily, leaving voicemails filled with guilt and frustration. Their father sent long emails explaining how much effort and money had gone into the wedding. Diana posted emotional messages on social media about loyalty and family support. Sarah watched the situation slowly spiral into something ugly and exhausting, all because she refused to risk her health. The final confrontation happened 3 weeks before the wedding and the surgery. Sarah had taken a day off work because the pain in her knee had become unbearable after a rainy night. She was resting on the couch with ice packs when she suddenly heard her apartment door open. Her parents walked inside using the spare key they still had. We need to talk, her father said firmly. Her mother crossed her arms and looked at her with visible disappointment. This has gone on long enough, she said coldly. You need to stop being selfish. Sarah slowly sat up on the couch, her injured legs still elevated on pillows. She was exhausted from the pain and the endless arguments. Selfish, she repeated quietly. Her mother nodded firmly. Yes, selfish, she said. Your sister needs you at her wedding and you're refusing to make a small adjustment. Sarah stared at her in disbelief. You think major reconstructive surgery is a small adjustment? She asked. Her father stepped forward, trying to sound reasonable. We're asking you to think about someone else for once, he said. Diana only gets married once. Sarah took a slow breath, trying to stay calm. I've been thinking about everyone else for years, she said quietly. But this surgery determines whether I'll be able to walk normally again. Her mother shook her head impatiently. You'll figure something out, she said dismissively. You always do. That sentence hit Sarah harder than anything else. She had always been the one expected to solve problems alone while Diana received support and attention. Her father crossed his arms and spoke firmly. "Call your doctor tomorrow," he said. "Tell them you need a different date." Something inside Sarah finally broke. Maybe it was the pain in her knee. Maybe it was years of feeling invisible. Or maybe it was hearing them once again treat her health like an inconvenience. "Get out," she said quietly. Both of her parents froze. "Excuse me," her mother asked. Sarah pointed toward the door. "Get out of my apartment," she repeated. "Give me back the key and leave." Her father looked shocked. "You can't be serious," he said. But Sarah's voice remained steady. "I'm completely serious." Her mother's face turned red with anger. "If you don't come to that wedding," she said coldly, "don't bother coming to any family events ever again." The threat hung heavily in the room. No holidays. No Sunday dinners. Nothing. Sarah felt a strange calm settle over her. "Understood," she replied quietly. "Now give me the key." Her mother pulled the key from her purse and threw it onto the coffee table before storming out of the apartment. Her father followed without another word, closing the door behind them. Sarah sat there for a long time after they left, staring at the key on the table. The silence in the apartment felt heavy but strangely peaceful. Her parents had made their position clear. It was the wedding or the family. Slowly she reached forward and picked up the key. "I guess that answers everything," she murmured to herself. Later that night she called Vivian and explained what had happened. Vivian listened quietly before speaking. "Sarah," she said firmly, "you did the right thing." And for the first time in weeks Sarah believed it. The morning of June 15th arrived earlier than Sarah expected. Vivian drove her to the hospital before sunrise while the city was still quiet and the streets were empty. Sarah stared out the window, feeling nervous but strangely relieved. "You're doing the right thing," Vivian reminded her gently while parking near the hospital entrance. Sarah nodded slowly. "I know," she said. Inside the hospital, nurses prepared her for surgery while doctors reviewed the procedure one last time. Dr. Michael Hayes appeared shortly before the operation. "We're going to take good care of you," he assured her. The surgery lasted nearly 5 hours. When Sarah woke up in the recovery room, everything felt heavy and distant. Her knee was wrapped in thick bandages and immobilized in a brace. Vivian was sitting beside the bed when her eyes finally opened. "Hey," Vivian said softly. "The surgery went well." Sarah blinked slowly, trying to focus. A little later Dr. Hayes came to check on her progress. "The damage was worse than the scans showed," he explained. "But we repaired everything successfully." Sarah listened carefully, still groggy but relieved to hear those words. Recovery during the first weeks was far harder than Sarah expected. Simple tasks like standing, walking to the bathroom, or adjusting her position in bed required careful effort. Vivian stayed with her during the first 2 weeks exactly as promised. She helped with medications, meals, and physical therapy exercises. "Take it slow," Vivian would remind her whenever Sarah tried to push too hard. Meanwhile, social media filled with photos from Diana's wedding. Beautiful gardens, white dresses, smiling guests, and fairy lights glowing in the evening air. Sarah saw the pictures but quickly closed the apps. What hurt most was not missing the wedding itself. It was the silence that followed. Her parents never called to ask how the surgery went. Diana never sent a message to check on her recovery. Days turned into weeks without any contact from them. Only a few relatives reached out quietly to ask how she was doing. Her aunt sent flowers and a short note wishing her a smooth recovery. But from the people who mattered most there was nothing. The absence of their voices slowly confirmed what Sarah already knew. The first month after surgery was the most painful period of Sarah's life. Her knee felt stiff, swollen, and constantly sore. Physical therapy sessions were slow and frustrating. Sometimes she felt like she was learning how to walk all over again. Vivian visited frequently even after returning to her own apartment. "You're stronger than you think," she reminded Sarah whenever the exercises felt impossible. Gradually, small improvements began to appear. Sarah could bend her knee a little more each week. She could move around the apartment with crutches. By the 3rd month, Sarah was finally able to walk short distances with a cane instead of crutches. The improvement felt incredible after months of pain and limitation. She even began working part-time from home for the museum, writing educational material and organizing exhibit research. Her manager was supportive and patient. "Take the time you need," he told her during one video call. Sarah appreciated that kindness more than she could explain. Slowly, life began to feel normal again. 6 months after surgery, Sarah returned to the museum full-time. Walking through the galleries without constant pain felt like a miracle. She could climb the archive stairs again and guide visitors through exhibits without limping. Her boss even mentioned a possible promotion for the upcoming year. "Your determination during recovery impressed everyone," he said. Sarah smiled, realizing how far she had come since the day of the surgery. For the first time in years, she felt hopeful about the future. By then, Sarah had built a new routine that did not include her family. Sunday dinners were replaced with brunch with Vivian and a few close friends. Holidays were spent with people who actually cared about her well-being. The sadness of losing her family slowly faded into something quieter. It still hurt sometimes, but it no longer controlled her life. She had learned to build a support system that was chosen rather than expected. Then one evening, 6 months after the surgery, Sarah's phone rang unexpectedly. The caller ID showed her mother's name. Sarah stared at the screen for several seconds before answering. "Hello," she said cautiously. Her mother's voice sounded unusually cheerful. "Hi honey," she said sweetly. "How are you? How's your knee?" Sarah immediately noticed the strange tone. 6 months of silence and now sudden concern. "The surgery went well," Sarah replied carefully. "I'm back at work now." "That's wonderful," her mother said quickly. "I knew everything would work out." Sarah remained quiet, sensing that the conversation was heading somewhere else. Finally, she asked the question directly. "What do you need, Mom?" There was a short pause on the line before her mother sighed. "Your father and I are in a difficult financial situation," she admitted. "We had some unexpected expenses after the wedding, and now we need to borrow some money." Sarah leaned back slowly, already realizing exactly why the call had come. Sarah held the phone quietly for a moment after hearing those words. "How much money?" she finally asked. Her mother answered quickly, almost too quickly. $15,000, she said. "It's just temporary. Your father had a medical procedure recently, and between that and some wedding expenses we're stretched thin." Sarah leaned back on the couch, feeling the old frustration rise again. 6 months of silence had passed without a single question about her recovery. Now suddenly she was needed again. "What kind of medical procedure?" Sarah asked calmly. Her mother sounded slightly irritated by the question. "Kidney stone surgery," she replied. "It was very painful and had to be done quickly." Sarah remembered the word Diana had used months earlier when describing her own surgery. Elective. Technically scheduled procedures were often labeled that way in medical language. Sarah thought about how her own surgery had been dismissed as unnecessary. "When did this happen?" she asked. "About 3 weeks ago," her mother answered. Sarah noticed the timeline immediately. They had waited weeks before calling her. "Why didn't you ask Diana and her husband?" Sarah asked next. Her mother sighed again. "They're busy starting their new life together," she explained. "They have their own expenses." Sarah almost laughed quietly at the familiar logic. Her sister's life was always protected from inconvenience. "What about the bank?" Sarah asked. "Our credit isn't great after the wedding expenses," her mother admitted. "It would just be easier if family helped." The word family echoed heavily in Sarah's mind. "I'll think about it," Sarah said carefully before ending the call. Later that evening she told Vivian everything that had happened. Vivian listened quietly while shaking her head. "You're not actually considering giving them money, right?" she asked. Sarah hesitated for a moment. "He's still my father," she said. Vivian leaned forward. "Your father told you to risk permanent damage to your leg so you could attend a party," she reminded her gently. "They don't get to play the family card now." The next evening Sarah's mother called again. "Have you decided?" she asked impatiently. Sarah took a deep breath before answering. "No," she said firmly. There was silence on the line for several seconds. "What do you mean no?" her mother demanded. Sarah spoke calmly. "You told me 6 months ago that if I chose surgery over the wedding, I wouldn't be part of the family anymore." Her mother immediately protested. "That was different," she insisted. "This is a real emergency." Sarah felt a quiet strength growing in her voice. "My surgery was also a real emergency," she said. It determined whether I could walk normally again. Her mother tried to interrupt, but Sarah continued. You didn't call to check on me after the surgery. You didn't ask if it went well. You didn't care. Her mother's tone became colder. So you're really refusing to help your own father? She asked. Sarah answered simply. Yes. Her mother's anger exploded instantly. After everything we've done for you, she shouted. Sarah remained calm. You spent $32,000 on Diana's wedding, she replied. But you couldn't even ask how my surgery went. The line fell silent for a moment. If you don't help us, her mother said finally, we're done. Sarah almost smiled at the familiar threat. You already told me we were done 6 months ago, she said quietly. Then she hung up. That night Sarah blocked her parents' numbers and Diana's number as well. Her phone rang several more times from unknown numbers, but she ignored them. When Vivian came over later that weekend with takeout and wine, Sarah felt strangely peaceful. How do you feel? Vivian asked. Sarah thought about it carefully. Free, she answered honestly. For the first time in her life she had set a boundary and actually kept it. Months passed quietly after that. Sarah focused on her work at the museum and continued strengthening her knee through physical therapy. She eventually received the promotion her manager had mentioned earlier. Her new role involved organizing educational programs and special exhibits. Life slowly filled with new friendships, new routines, and new opportunities. The absence of her family still hurt sometimes, but it no longer defined her life. Almost a year after the surgery, Sarah was guiding a tour through the museum when she noticed someone standing quietly at the back of the group. It was her mother. Sarah finished the tour professionally before walking toward her. Your knee looks better, her mother said softly. The surgery was successful, Sarah replied. Her mother hesitated before apologizing for everything that had happened. Sarah listened carefully before answering calmly. I accept the apology, she said. But I've already built a life that doesn't include this relationship anymore. Then she returned to her work, finally at peace with the choice she made on June 15th.